I mentioned Amy Davidson on the What Difference Does It Make? There will be plenty of people, she writes in The New Yorker, who applaud Hillary's performance, the fight she brought to her confrontations with Republicans. In that sense, it is one more reflection of the deeply divergent emotions she evokes. If she had not gotten into the fight with Johnson, that is Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, the memorable moment might have been when she choked up talking about the 4 diplomats. But by the end, she looked like a woman who thought that she was stooping to appear at this venue. The question now is whether that approach suits a 2016 candidate, well or badly. L.A. Times, Michael McGough writes, I don't know if it was rehearsed, but Secretary of State Clinton made the political play of the day Wednesday during the Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearings. That was with the Ron Johnson. And again, the quote, you've heard it by now, I'm sure, but just in case you haven't, she was talking about, the quote is, with all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go on to kill some Americans? What's the difference? What difference at this point does it make? It is our job to figure out what happened and do everything we can to prevent it from ever happening again, Senator. Actually, he writes, it does matter whether the attacks in Benghazi were guys out for a walk or well-organized jihadists, although the attack wouldn't have been less of an act of terror if it had been spontaneous. But Clinton's exasperated response highlighted the fact that Republicans have seemed more interested in pillorying Rice for her misrepresentation than in investigating security lapses that allowed the Benghazi attack to occur. Anyway, a couple of things. Dana Milbank also has some fun stuff we're going to get into, but since Alan Kelly is here, we want to talk more about this. Alan, of course, is the CEO, founder of Playmaker Systems, and joined us. Good morning.
Good morning.
You heard the play? Somebody referenced a play.
Yep.
And I will tell you that almost everything that I'm reading this morning is through the filter of 2016. It is through the filter of the presidential race in 2016. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about security, and there's some discussion about, frankly, the 2012 election, whether or not the administration played loose.
Tim, this is about Benghazi.
Yes, of course.
The purposes of the testimony.
And where Benghazi, who will in Benghazi be voting for Secretary Clinton for president in 2016?
Okay, well, we all agree there's no such thing as the
race is on
in politics. Yeah.
No, well, I mean, it's clear that people are looking at it that way, whether or not the intent of the interrogators or the woman on the witness stand were about 2016, but that's the filter that we're all seeing it through. So anyway, let's talk about the plays, though, because she was there yesterday. What was your take on it?
It reminded me of a war game across the river at the Pentagon, the Department of Defense. There's a standard way that they have. It's very well used. A 4-sided convention where you have blue, you have red, you have green, you have white. In this case,
sounds like Twister.
Yeah, it's well, yeah, I saw that out there. Left hand blue. But Clinton was playing blue. She's generally a good guy or client side. In the red, you had McCain, Rubio, Corker, Paul Rand, Ron Johnson.
Yeah, all the Republicans.
They're the rivals, and that's what they often call the blue-red.
You meant Rand Paul, right? You said Paul Rand.
Sorry, well, okay. I always do that. And then Boxer, Durbin, Ben Cardin in green. They're surrogates or they're allies to blue, and then white is bystanders or third parties or technically uninterested or unaffiliated, and that would be, I guess, you and me. That would be the media. So I thought what I saw there was a classic war game unfolding, where you had a blue player running a set of plays, being countered by a set of red players, being supported by a set of green players, and today, as the news rolls out, now the media and pundits and commentators are running their plays and casting it as they see it as well. Mm-hmm. So it was a classic 4-sided dynamic of point, counterpoint, and what we call influence strategy.
Let's talk a little bit about some specific things.
The terrorist attacks in Benghazi that claimed the lives of 4 brave Americans, Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Tyrone Woods, and Glenn Doherty, are part of a broader strategic challenge to the United States and our partners in North Africa.
That goes on for another minute or so, and I'm not sure how much we need to bring, but give us a sense of what she was doing here.
2 plays, okay. A recast and what we call a red herring. Mm-hmm. In other words, she is organizing the facts as the way she would prefer to represent them. That is a very preferential way to open up.
And this is her opening statement, so naturally she would do that. So it would sort of, you would think, set the stage for the questions.
Absolutely, and that falls in the category of what we call framing plays, where you're trying to adjust or sort of knead the bread or condition or make things kind of as you want them to be. But I think that I think you have to say that part of the play or the strategy she's using is a red herring. She's trying to throw the dogs, the marauders, off into a direction that they probably shouldn't go. She is trying to say, listen, this is this and this, that, but there's a much broader problem going on here. That was her first ploy, is to say, we can talk about Benghazi all you want, but baby, we've got problems. It's not just the Middle East, it's North Africa, and so on and so forth. So 2 plays to start.
All right, so she also talks about being in front of Congress.
We're also taking a top-to-bottom look to rethink how we make decisions on where, when, and whether our people should operate in high-threat areas and how we respond. We are initiating an annual high-threat post review, chaired for the first time in American history, I suppose, by the Secretary of State, and ongoing reviews by the Deputy Secretaries to ensure that pivotal questions about security reach the highest level. And we will regularize protocols for sharing information with Congress.
It's a neat new word, regularize, but anyway, it is the Secretary. So what's she doing here, Alan?
She's running a play that we call, not to be named after Donald Trump, the Trump. It's like in bridge, where you have a card that's more powerful than the other. You're attempting to reverse competitive position. She's throwing down a card of sorts so that she can take the advantage. She would expect them to ask a variety of questions about, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why isn't something regularized? And so she's saying, we will do this, we will do that, and we will regularize. So she's trying to get ahead of what she would expect to be the attacks from the red players.
There was a moment also, and this was early on, and she was discussing her, and this was actually in the opening statement. So let's give a listen. I want to get your take on whether or not this is a play. We can assume that everything is a play in politics, but let's give a listen.
For me, this is not just a matter of policy. It's personal. I stood next to President Obama as the Marines carried those flag-draped caskets off the plane at Andrews. I put my arms around the mothers and fathers, the sisters and brothers, the sons and daughters, and the wives left alone to raise their children. It has been one of the great honors of my life to lead the men and women of the State Department and USAID.
Anyway, she just about lost it, brought it back. So you remember in 2008 when she was running for president in New Hampshire, she had started becoming emotional. This is very important to me. I take this very personally. This was considered to be her human moment, if you will, the one where she kind of turned it around and she wound up winning the New Hampshire primary. It made it a much longer slog eventually to the nomination for then Senator Obama. But I get the question is, I mean, is this the humanity coming through? Is it a play, or do you turn it into a play? I mean, how do you interpret this?
Well, this is part of her opening testimony.
Right. This is the opening statement.
Yeah, and so it is deliberate. I think you have to say that. I know that depends on your politics, and she's a polarizing figure. I mean, yesterday as I watched it, I thought that I was watching a genuine Hillary Clinton. Today, as I listen to it, I feel like I'm maybe hearing Sally Field. They're very, very different days. Is it a diplomat or is it an actor? The plays in question here that I think which are designed into your opening testimony are 2. There's a play called A Ping, which is a very subtle reference to say and to suggest, I'm human, okay, guys? And then the other is a play we call A Screen, which is very popular, particularly in advertising, where you find some symbol, idea to attach to yourself, thus to make your statement or your position, your platform larger than what it is. In other words, she's referencing, the flag-draped coffins, coming in and coming home. Very rich imagery to enrich her narrative as well.
The one thing about that, I will say, Alan Kelly, is that, and this is not to inject myself into it too much, but there have been times when I have rehearsed in my mind several things that I would do at moments that I knew were going to be somewhat emotional. I was a best man at a wedding. My son, I was saying goodbye when he was going to school for the first time, when he went to the military, and I practiced it in my mind, and I was cool. And then at the moment, I lost it, and I knew what was coming, but I still couldn't stop it. So I wonder if we can be that cynical about her emotion at that point.
Well, you can certainly, when a person is genuine or spontaneous, they do what they do. That doesn't mean, or that doesn't prevent any of us from being able to diagnose it as that, or having a resultant strategic capability.
Mm-hmm.
So she may have wanted just simply to talk about that, but nonetheless, it does serve to project her innocence and her humility, her humanness, and it does serve to project her into a very dicey and responsible position of dead bodies coming home.
Last click when we're almost out of time. Senator Barbara Boxer.
You have represented our country with tremendous strength and poise. You've won us friends, but you've always spoken out forcefully where required. I want to thank you because this is maybe the last time you come before us as secretary here.
This has happened a lot yesterday. People talking about, if you run for president, it'll be great, and mostly Democrats falling all over themselves to say how wonderful she is.
The red players, the Republicans, had to have been going crazy.
Well, Senator John McCain says the world is much safer and they respect us a lot more. And by the way, I don't believe a word you said.
That's true. I don't know if we have time for McCain. He was beautiful.
We don't.
But if you noticed, there was the classic blue-red volley between Clinton and the red players, McCain, Rubio, Corker, Rand Paul, Ron Johnson. But in between them came the brigade to save her. To the extent that she was wounded, had holes shot in her ship, they came along to patch them. And they said, "Oh, I hope you're feeling better," which is a ping and a reference to her blood clot and her concussion. And, "Oh, I'm so sorry, it's the last time we'll see you," which is a ping, a reference to the fact that she may be back as president. And so they were, and thank you for those 1,000,000 miles, which is to say, my gosh, you're such a warrior for us. So
I'm looking for a job in your administration.
Absolutely. Don't forget me, babe, in 2016.
Right. Remember who supported you all that time.
So it was just a classic dynamic between red and blue and green. And today, as white players and independents, we're discussing it all.
Same committee today, by the way, with John Kerry. It'd be interesting to see the dynamic a little bit different. But Alan Kelly, as always, what's the website?
Playmakersystems.com.
Okay.
You can follow me on Twitter at PlaymakerAlan.
All right. And we always get great response, so glad you're in this morning.
Thank you.
We've